Welcome to Skip the Queue, a podcast for people working in or working with visitor attractions. I'm your host, Kelly Molson. In today's episode, I speak with Neil Dolan, Head of Operations at Madame Tussauds London. We'll talk about Neil's experience of switching the attraction from a predominantly international market to a domestic, how they've heavily invested in the experience, and what cocktail making has to do with all of this. If you like what you hear, subscribe on all the usual channels by searching Skip the Queue. Neil, thank you so much for coming on the podcast today. It's really lovely to see you.
No, it's great. Thanks for inviting me on. I'm really looking forward to it.
Good. Well, you might not say that after we've done the icebreaker question. Okay, let's go straight in. If you could be anywhere in the world right now, where would you choose to be?
There's always this, I always have to do this comparison in my head that because I think when I was probably 10, I got to go to Disneyland for the first time and absolutely loved it. And became that sort of kid that every year just almost like, we're going back to Disneyland. And it was almost that amazing moment I remember when I was a child. And then me and my partner went again before we had a child. And it was still just as amazing. So whenever me and my partner are talking about a holiday, we use almost Disney as the par. It doesn't matter if we're going to the most luxurious resort. We always talk about, but the first time we get to take him to Disneyland.
Oh,
because that magic is just, it's just awesome.
How old are you have children?
Yes, I've got a son who'll be 3 in April. Okay. So I actually spent a good 3 hours of my night last night sleeping on his bedroom floor. Just so,
oh gosh. I'm so with you on Disney. I think it is just the most magical place. Your child is 3 now. What age do you think that you're gonna? What age are you like waiting until they're ready to go?
We kind of were, and this is where we were a little bit selfish because we were almost like, how tall will he be when he's 6? How tall will he be when he's 7? And does that mean we can go on these rides? I think it does. So we're kind of like, we want to have that perfect, because when you're there, you see all those like amazing like play areas that they can play in when they're really, really young. But we almost want that magical age where they really associate everything with the films. And then when you almost walk through the gates at Magic Kingdom for the first time, they kind of get what it is. Yeah. And like that amazing look on the face is kind of what we're aiming. So we think probably 6 or 7.
We have just had this same debate, but I had it with my parents because they're massive Disney fans as well. Right. And they turned 70 this year. And so Edie is nearly 8 months old now. And they're like, well, so we're thinking 5 because then we'll be 75 and we won't be like too old that we won't enjoy it still. And I'm like, but okay, I get it, but also that's a bit selfish. And
everyone's
we're like,
got the same train of thought. Like everybody is absolutely got themselves at the forefront because it doesn't matter how old you are. It's just such a great place.
No, and I'm 5'2" and Lee's only about 5'8", so there's no hope that she's going to be like a tall grower at all. So I think 6 is all right. Thank you for sharing that. That's so weird that we've all had the same chat about that. Okay, what did you want to be when you grew up?
So I actually read through my primary school yearbook about 3-4 months ago, and we got asked the same question. And I played ice hockey for about 25 years, and I was really specific. There's a team called Colorado Avalanche, and I wrote in my yearbooks I wanted to be the left defender for the Colorado Avalanche. Wow! And I was like, that's a really specific, position and team and everything. So yeah, for years I wanted to be a professional ice hockey player. Oh my goodness! But you still play, so you got to a certain point. Yeah, still played when I was at university. Played for the Edinburgh team for a year, and it was significantly detrimental to my studies. So I continued to play for fun when I was at university, and then when I moved to London, there's not as many ice rinks, and they're more difficult to get to. And I played a little bit in Streatham when I lived in Earlsfield, and I had to get 2 night buses back from Streatham at sort of midnight midnight. And I thought maybe I'll wait until I move somewhere else. Yeah. So I play with a team in Slough, which is great. It's just a good bunch of guys, having a laugh. So it is absolutely brilliant to go and watch, and quite brutal as well. I quite like that. Yeah, and everyone always says, were you one of the people that was absolutely brutal? And in my head, I want to say yes. Definitely not. As much as I would love to to hold that up, I was not that guy.
Okay, it's good that you're still doing it though. I love how niche that was. Okay, what show on Netflix did you binge watch embarrassingly fast?
Embarrassingly fast. The one, it's probably not so much embarrassing, but the one which is almost like one of those golden nuggets was, there was a show called Lilyhammer that was it was like 6 years ago or so, which was like a comedy, a dark comedy drama about a mob boss who becomes an informant in America, then goes to live in Lilyhammer because they hosted the Winter Olympics in the 90s. And it's the actor from The Sopranos whose name always escapes me. But it's one of those embarrassing things that I can never do it justice. So whenever I try and explain it to someone, they think that sounds terrible. It's like an awful show.
It's not something that I've watched.
But it's so funny. Like if you're into that kind of dark sarcastic humor, it's honestly brilliant.
Right.
Whether or not it's still on Netflix or not,
I'm going to add that to my list. That it wasn't as embarrassing as I was expecting it to be. I mean, mine's Cobra Kai, which is, I mean, that's pretty embarrassing, isn't it? I got a little bit obsessed with Cobra Kai. Wow. Okay. What is your unpopular opinion?
So I kind of, this is probably the most difficult one to think of actually, but I think it's probably that I kind of think that the Sunday roast is overrated.
What?
I think I would prefer to have an expertly made pizza than a Sunday roast, because I think they look better. I think the product looks amazing on Instagram, and there are very good Sunday roasts, but the effort to make a Sunday roast, I don't think the hype is.
I can't agree with you on this. I mean, a Sunday roast is like my and I love pizza, don't get me wrong, but a Sunday roast is my favourite meal of the whole week. It is a lot of effort. I know what you're saying, to cook it all and then suddenly, and it's gone really quickly, isn't it?
Yeah, it is.
No. Okay. All right, listeners, tweet me. Let me know what you feel about that. I reckon I might get some stick about that, Neil. Okay, Neil, you began as head of operations at Madame Tussauds in December 2020, which must have been quite an interesting time to start a new job, I can imagine.
Yeah, it was my first day at Madame Tussauds was actually the first day of lockdown 3. So I basically didn't get to meet anyone. In fact, the first conversations I had with my new team was almost telling them about, furlough coming back. So it began this really weird sort of phase where I was in the role for quite a long time, but I just hadn't really met anyone. There was only, a very small number of people who were still working. Unfortunately, we had sort of weekly Zoom calls where I kind of got to meet some of the team and get to know people to an extent, but it was nowhere near as good as it is when you actually get to go in and meet people for the first time and get to understand, who people are, what makes them tick, and actually get to know people.
Yeah.
So it was a really, really, really bizarre time, but in many ways it was quite exciting, because I almost got to look at everything while you're closed. You got to look at almost the bare basics, which you don't always get to do when you're sort of caught up in, I guess, the business as usual, the normal trading. So
yeah, that's quite interesting, isn't it? Because you're looking at it from the perspective, well, no one can come anyway. So actually, this is kind of almost like a blank canvas, so to speak, to see where the pitfalls are, or the challenges are, or what's working well and what isn't working well.
Yeah, and I'm so fortunate here, because the team I've got are incredible. And what I knew in we're talking days, where I got to speak to some people, I guess the passion that the people who work at Madame Tussauds have for Madame Tussauds was, I've never seen anything like it. They're so in love with this place, and that to me was almost like, it's very difficult to get people to be passionate about something that they may not be, but that passion was kind of already there. So when I started, I was like, well, I don't have to worry about that, because they're already like so far gone. They absolutely love what they're doing.
Yeah. So there wasn't a lot of kind of, you didn't have to be really motivational for them. You didn't have to kind of.
Absolutely not. No, because they have that. We've got some people who are in my team that have been here for 30 years, and they just love their job. And when you get to sit down and speak to them about, what is it that they love, they just are like, well, I just love this place. I've always worked here. You're like, that's so nice to hear. So you don't always get that in sort of new establishments, or I guess different sectors.
Yeah, that's really lovely, isn't it? I guess that kind of helped with some of the things that we're going to talk about as well, because you've been through some quite big changes, haven't you? So, one of the things that you needed to do was make, quite a significant switch in terms of who your audience was, because, you've gone from predominantly being having an international market to domestic because they're international travel. Like, where do you even start with that?
Yeah, so we were a little bit unique, I guess, in comparison to some of the market, because just before one of the lockdowns, there'd already been some plans for some renovations and some investment, and there was probably like a stop-go time where the decision was made: do we keep investing given all the challenges that are going to come, and cash flow being such a topic amongst our industry in particular. And what was really nice when it came was, the view was, we need to invest in the product, we need to invest in the experience. So we almost went the opposite way. So rather than kind of going into a shell of, we need to be really conservative, it was, we need to invest back in the experience, because London's one of those places that tourism will bounce back, because London as a city is just such an amazing place, and Madame Tussauds London is such an institution that I think there's good confidence that once the markets are back, that they'll come back when they're back in the city. But to get that domestic side, it was almost to think about, well, what is it maybe that domestics think, or what is it domestics are passionate about, and try and tailor what the investment we were going to do to ensure that we were speaking to them. So when we reopened, we launched our new awards party, and we had and we'd moved Harry and Meghan, which was the press sort of jumped at, because originally they were with the royals in our sort of royal area, and then when they decided to take a different step down from senior royals, we moved them into our new awards party area to be with the likes of your Leonardo DiCaprio's and Dwayne Johnson's. And that PR hook that we got was amazing, because we were then able to speak to our domestic audience of, look what we're doing at Madame Tussauds, look what you can come and see what's on your doorstep.
Yeah.
And that was the first thing that we did when we reopened, that we would have probably done anyway, but the message we were trying to get to people is, this attraction has always been here, and now it's probably going to be slightly quieter, so even better, come and enjoy.
It's funny, isn't it? Because I guess you've had to go through changing the perception of what Madame Tussauds is for the domestic market, because I think, I've been there. I went years ago with my parents. I can remember it. I've got my novelty eraser from there. I've got it right next to me. I've got my rubber from Madame Tussauds for my collection. But in my head, I do see it as a tourist destination. It's somewhere that I would love to take my daughter one day for her to experience it. But it's changing that perception of what it is in people's heads, isn't it? And that's quite a difficult thing to do.
Yeah, and it's come with some challenges, and kind of going back to the benefit that I had of being able to, I guess, look under the bonnet when I started, was there was probably some things that as a team that we focused on quite heavily when we reopened, that have probably gone to benefit, I guess, that domestic market to maybe see a different side of us. So we were very when we reopened, we were very much like experience, customer service. And what has been really, really nice is that we've probably, I guess, focused quite a lot on what our external reviews are looking like. And, we don't have to shy away from the fact that we probably had a reputation for queues. Everyone used to talk about Madame Tussauds got loads of queues. So we're very much focusing on, let's get that reputation down about us having queues and being crowded. And what's been really nice, that because we've done that focus and ultimately, I guess, simplify it a little bit, make things a lot easier. We've seen our review scores go up. We've seen the theme of our reviews completely change. And that's really good, because when domestics are looking at that, looking at those reviews, they're rightly seeing that there are long queues and it's overcrowded. And I guess by us taking a step back, looking at, okay, why is that the case? We're in such a better place. And that the fact that that's now showing in our reviews is great, because you can do all the marketing you want in the world, but if your advocacy is not strong enough, or people go onto Google reviews and have a look at what people are saying, and it's all negative, people won't go there.
Yeah. So what kind of things did you do? Just talk us through a little bit what you did there, because the queue issue is that's a big issue to address. What did you put in place to make that better?
So we've always had almost a time ticketing system. It probably improved sort of over the 2017 to 2019, but there were some technological challenges we still had, where there were some guests who still had the old school paper voucher, who then had to come to the attraction to exchange that, to then get a time ticket, to then almost come back later. So already that guest has had this really mixed experience, because it's not their fault. They've already bought their ticket from someone. And then the system has then almost said, well, yeah, but you have to come back later and queue again. So that already is completely confusing, and is a bad experience. And, potentially, because we are quite an international audience, if that person doesn't speak English particularly well, it's even more frustrating.
Yeah.
So when we reopened, we worked really hard with our partners, so that everyone who books through, I guess, even through a third party, has a ticket that they only have to queue once, that has a time on it with very clear information. So we almost, instead of having, I guess, the bulk of our guests turning up, within 2 to 3 hours in the middle of the day, when everyone tends to go to attractions, just spreading them out through the day means that there's less queues, there's less people going into the building. It's just a better experience. And it sounds really simple, but the pandemic was horrible for so many reasons. But in some ways, for, I guess, the technology side, businesses had to adapt, and we had to do things better, and that's been a massive change for us.
Yeah, definitely. I mean, we've had this conversation numerous times on the podcast about pre-booking and the benefits of it, and why most will want to keep it, past the pandemic as well. Were you predominantly? How does it work with the international audience for you? Would people predominantly buy tickets in advance, or were you more a walk-up attraction?
I guess, again, that's kind of changed, or we've seen it change at the moment. Since the pandemic. So we used to do, quite a lot of tickets from a walk-up perspective, and we do a good proportion online. And because we are quite internationally heavy in some respects, we would do a lot through sort of third parties and through the trade industry. What we've kind of seen at the moment is there's been a massive swing from sort of walk-up tickets to online booking, and I think that's probably. It's difficult to draw a conclusion from it, because it's very domestic heavy at the moment, and we're just so used to doing that. It's almost ingrained. In fact, I pre-booked to go to the swimming pool the other day, which 3 years ago you just wouldn't do. You just turn up with your armbands and get, or I turn up with my armbands anyway.
I mean, don't we all?
Yeah, we all. I mean, absolutely. In some ways, that's really helpful, because it allows you to make sure that you've got the right resource in. It allows you to plan throughout the day properly. You don't always get caught off guard. So again, it's a massive benefit from us to be able to actually manage the experience. Whereas if you walk up is great, and I don't think it's anything we would ever stop doing. But if you get a massive surge of people who just turn up on the day, you could be caught off guard, and that can be detrimental.
So that's an interesting question, is it? So how much of your market did you lose overnight? So what did it go from?
Well, we're probably the majority international, and even the minority domestic that we had before, there was a good proportion of that were schools. So you almost turned off the majority of our market. Wow. And then of the domestic market, we lost the school booking, because they weren't doing that either. And that's not just for us, that's almost for London, that these people just weren't there. In fact, I walked through Covent Garden was it 2 Fridays ago, on a Friday night, and it was dead.
Wow.
And you just think that there's, I don't know, 6 million tourists or whatever it is that comes in a short period of time that just aren't in the city. So we knew it was going to be challenging, and we knew in particular it was going to be challenging in the times when schools weren't off, because you're more reliant on, I guess, sort of overnighter, couples or families who aren't in school, so people with really, really young children. So just a really tough position to be in. But
thinking about what you said about the pre-booking and you would, you're always going to welcome walkups as well. I think that's kind of the nature of like where you're located and what you do and the market that you have. How do you kind of counter that? So for example, if you're going to keep pre-booking and you're still going to keep the time slots where you've got people, and then you get an influx of people that just want to come on that day for those times, how are you going to make the experience? How are you going to keep the experience as good as it is now when that market comes back and that kind of that shift happens?
Yeah, so I mean, a big part of it is communicate. A lot of it is communicating to our guests really, really, really clearly. So the benefits of almost like a high percentage pre-booked model is you can kind of get in the morning and know where your full slots are, and what we've kind of got into a good position of doing now when we know we've got capacity challenges. And I'm hoping that you want to have capacity challenges in some instance because it means that you're busy. Is being quite honest and telling people. So I know certainly when I was in my previous role at the London Eye, when we had a busy day and it was almost sold out, we would put it on the website, or we would maybe put it on Twitter, or try and tell people in advance as best you can. What we kind of did, and this weekend was a good example of it, where we were really busy, was that we just made the decision that we'll just stay open for a little bit longer, and we can add additional availability after we would have closed. So for anyone who does turn up, we keep the doors open a little bit longer because we don't want them to go away disappointed. From a business perspective, we want to capitalize when there's people there to buy the ticket. And I would like to think we probably would have done that before, but I think certainly this post-COVID, rebuilding time, we've been trialing lots of different things and thinking probably a lot more differently than we probably would have, less rigid, I suppose. That was
going to be one of my questions. And like, just to go back to address that about staying open longer, that's really surprising for me, because I wouldn't have expected that level of flexibility from such a large attraction. Because that's okay. You make the decision. Are we going to stay open an hour later tonight? That's a lot of people that you've got to get to agree to do that, isn't it? That's that's really great.
It is, and this is again going back to my comment about the team here. Like they genuinely just love this place, and they love it when it's really busy. And that's I think that's probably anyone who's an operator. As much as they think, oh, I'm really tired after that peak period, as soon as the off-peak period comes, they're like, I wish it was peaking again. Yeah. The credit of that needs to go to my team of management, because they've got that relationship with the team that the team also know it's more beneficial, because they would rather we were open a little bit longer rather than us trying to put more people through the doors, because that could be the other way of doing it. But then going back to that whole point of you need to protect the experience to improve your advocacy, to make the business more appealing. The team, we're very honest with our team in terms of what our strategy is. And our strategy is we need to maintain the experience. It was one of those proud moments actually when one of the team messaged say we're going to stay open later because we're really busy. I was like, that's awesome. And that's almost them feeling that they're empowered to make that decision. I was just like, that's great, do it.
That is lovely. You've done your job well. That's it. Like you say, you've empowered them to do that, and that's at the benefit of the visitors as well. That's really fantastic. I was genuinely really surprised by that. You mentioned doing things differently, and that was one of the questions that I had for you. Is some of the benefits of the pandemic for organisations is that we've had to think really quickly and change what we're doing and take chances on stuff. Are there things that you've tried that you previously wouldn't have thought about?
Yeah, so one of the phrases that I used a couple of times was, let's try it, because if it's 5% wrong, it's 5% of, not a lot. Yeah. Whereas if you do it in sort of summer peak period in normal times, that could be quite, it could be quite massive. So we did, we tried different promotions. We tried, different pricing strategies. We tried new products. So we did a product where, our last year, the sort of last hour of the day tended to be the quietest. So we did a product with a gin company that it'd be almost a discounted ticket, and someone got a free glass of this cocktail that was made. And normally you wouldn't have been able to do it because you'd be so nervous that, but what if too many people buy it? We won't be able to serve the cocktails enough. Like, who's going to make the cocktail? And in the end, we thought, we'll just make it work. It'll be fine. So we ended up we did like a cocktail making class.
At Madame Tussauds?
They came in, they taught us how to make the cocktail, and then members of our frontline team, if they were happy to do it, the last hour of the day, it was called Fame and Fizz, and they were on the Fame and Fizz position where they had to make cocktails for people who bought this ticket. And if I'm honest, we wouldn't have done it before, because I think everybody was probably in that mindset. It's like, well, no, it wouldn't work because operationally it wouldn't work. But no one would be able to tell you why. And I was always guilty for it. If I went back a good few years, I probably would have said the same thing. But we thought, let's try it. Let's see what happens. And it was, it was good for what it was. It was a good, and the guests obviously loved it, because who doesn't like a cocktail?
I mean, who doesn't love a cocktail? And if you don't, crazy. Like one of those crazy people that like pizza over roast dinners.
Never got all this time.
So that's it's quite liberating to try new things, isn't it? And let's just give it a go and see what happens. Do you feel like you can embrace that now with things going back to normal? Do you think that you'll still have the opportunity to try different things?
Yeah, I think you have to, and I think it's one of those things that I'm going to put enjoyed in a certain way, because for some of the team they'll be like, oh, that's another idea. Oh no. But again, it's almost that point of, what have you got to lose? And what if it's a success? Then amazing. We'll ride that success throughout. And the important thing with even with the things that don't work, what we've made a really conscious effort of is make sure that we almost document why it doesn't work and keep that somewhere really, really available. Because the worst thing and if I use the example of some of the team that have been here for 30 years, they probably will have seen the same thing tried over and over again. And it's never fair for those people for them to provide almost experience of why something hasn't worked. And for someone to go, yeah, but it's just being naysayer. And actually, sometimes it hasn't worked for a very good reason, but sometimes, with turnover, people don't remember why. And that's been, if there's anything certainly from the last year, it's that just trying things and seeing what happens. And if it doesn't work, just don't try it again. And we'll keep doing that.
I like that idea of documenting it, because you could get into that situation where you just think someone's been a bit of a Debbie Downer, but actually, no, you have tried this before.
We tried it, yeah.
And tell you exactly why this didn't work. I'm intrigued to know what other crazy ideas might be up your sleeves. I bet your team is quite intrigued as well.
Yeah, they tend to, when I sort of open my door, they kind of just about their eyes.
So what about your marketing? So you would have had to have made quite a significant switch in terms of what you were doing with your marketing, because domestic and international audiences, you would market to them in a completely different way. What was that shift? What did you change?
So there was some similarities. We would still have certainly in the peak periods, we still had an element of out of home. We would still do your more traditional sort of location advertising. But when you don't have that almost, speaking about London, because you don't have all of the internationals in the city, you can't really focus on that sort of location domination in the same way, because you're talking to not that many people, and that kind of marketing is just incredibly expensive. So when we were looking at, okay, so we've got an element of which are going to be day trippers, so we need to be speaking to them either through social media, which everybody uses more than anything else in the world now, and to an extent PR. But you also need that reach of, working with the right partners, because we want to be speaking to probably people in the northeast of England, and people in the southwest of England, people in Scotland, because we want them to come to Madame Tussauds when they're in London, and that's kind of half the battle. But the other half, which was incredibly difficult for us it wasn't something we could do by ourselves, was getting involved in the Let's Do London campaign. Yeah. Because what kind of came out of the pandemic was this buildup of demand amongst the domestic market who couldn't go abroad. But then the coastal areas did incredibly well. I mean, Cornwall, I don't think will have ever recovered from the influx of people that it had. But everything you saw in the news was, the underground's unsafe, there's too many people, it's too busy. When actually it was the complete opposite. London was dead. There was just no one around. So whereas we would normally never have done it, a lot of what we were trying to say to people was, we're safe. Here's the measures that we've got in place. We know what we're doing. The Good to Go thing was a great initiative that we could shout about. So we were, rather than always talking about the product, we had to do an element where we were talking about, the health and safety side. And a lot of that again was done through PR. was trying to, when we did have these launches, trying to caveat a bit of both. Like, come and see this amazing figure. We've preserved the experience. It's absolutely safe. We can't wait to see it.
Yeah, it's interesting, isn't it? Like the couple of times that I went into London during the pandemic, I just thought London was really lovely.
It's amazing.
Oh, it was so nice just walking around. No one was bumping into you. I could get a seat on the tube. It was glorious. I wasn't in anyone's armpit. That should be the marketing campaign.
That's the marketing campaign.
Come now, you won't be in anyone's armpit on the tube. So what next? So international travel is resuming.
Mm-hmm.
You mentioned that you were really busy this weekend, which is fantastic.
Yeah.
So what is next for Madame Tussauds? What can we see on the horizon?
A couple of things, really. So some of it is the learnings that we've taken from having a domestic focus is not to lose it, because what's been really reassuring is that and if it wasn't probably for the Omicron variant over Christmas, we'd probably be further down a recovery in London than we are, because October half term last year was really promising, and we've learned a lot about what it is that domestics like about the product. We've learned a lot about what is hopefully driving domestics here. So the main thing that we're going to do is to keep that focus, because we don't want to drop it. For us, that investment continues. We're continuing to invest in the product. So we've got our brand new music zone, which will open for Easter, which is going to be incredibly exciting. We had Zendaya launch in February, which has been received incredibly well. We did a documentary. That was the other thing we did last year, Madame Tussauds documentary, where it was talked about that the return of the Chamber of Horrors will come back to Madame Tussauds.
Wow!
So that product focus, is going to stay, because if it's one thing that I think we certainly learned from the pandemic, is that it's the experience. You can never take your experience for granted, because market share is not guaranteed and advocacy is not guaranteed. And we've been probably really proud of the fact that we've not been scared away from our plans, because what guests are telling us, and it's also great for the team here, because they're seeing great amounts of investment and areas of building just looking amazing. Like our new awards party is just so good. That continued investment, that continued focus on PR, that continued focus on the experience will do us absolute wonders when internationals come back. And we talk a lot about one of our target audiences being sort of families with sort of younger to middle teens who come just as they're really getting excited about celebrities. We talk a lot about, we really want to show how amazing this is, because we then want those teens to come back with their families later on. And that continual evolution of, because celebrity landscape changes all the time. That continual change in Madame Tussauds is important, because we need to reflect what the landscape is, and who knows what it'll look like in five or 6 years. So that's something we're very aware of, and something we're going to have to, keep an eye on as time goes on, because as we found, I think was in 2020, there was a petition from people to not take away the One Direction figures. Oh. People are really passionate about our product as well, so we have to take what's being said seriously.
Yeah, gosh. I mean, people do get really upset about things, don't they? I hadn't thought about
One
that.
Direction is a very, very passionate subject.
Are they still there, or did you take them away?
One Direction they were in our music zone just now, which will launch, as I said, will be for Easter. They may or may not be there when we open, but we're always we'll see what the public say.
They're gone but not forgotten.
Never forgotten.
Never forgotten. Neil, thank you so much. This has been such an enjoyable talk. Thanks for coming on and sharing everything that you've been through. It's been a bit of a whirlwind, I can imagine. We're at the end of the podcast, and I always ask our guests to share a book that they love. So something personal, something work-related, just something that you really enjoy that you think our listeners might as well.
Yeah. So I am, particularly when I was coming to work, I guess, during the third lockdown. I got lockdown's confused now. When you've been at work, and you always use like the train journey to kind of switch off from work. As I said, my son is absolutely obsessed with dinosaurs, to the point where by virtue now I am obsessed with dinosaurs. So I spent a good part of those train journeys reading Jurassic Park books, because I'd never read them before. I'd watched the films hundreds of times, but I'd never read the books. And I used to do this, and my partner was probably sick of me talking about it. I just basically go home and tell her about what I'd read in Jurassic Park. And it was such a good way to switch off, because, you know, particularly when you've got a little one, you definitely need that separation of work and home. And that was almost the transition where my son, who was pretty good at talking, but was correcting me on dinosaur pronunciation when they were sort of 2 years old. Where
does this come from? Because we've got, I mean, Edie's too young for this right now, but I really liked dinosaurs when I was a kid. But our friend's little boy is obsessed with dinosaurs, knows all of the complicated words that I can't even pronounce.
Yeah,
I have no idea where it's come from.
No, I don't. I have no idea. But yeah, being corrected by a 2-year-old was I didn't know what a Zuniceratops was, but when I googled it, and I was like, he's right. Okay, I'll take that one away.
Mind blown.
Yeah.
Okay. Oh, so we're recommending the Jurassic Park books. This is so
Absolutely.
Great. Oh, I love this. Okay. Well, look, listeners, if you want to win Neil's books, then if you head over to our Twitter account and you retweet this episode announcement with the words "I want Neil's books," then you may be lucky enough to win them. Who knows? Neil, thank you. It's been a really lovely chat. I've really enjoyed it. Thank you for coming on. Thank you to Paul Griffiths of Painshill Park, who put me in touch with you in the first place after I put my little shout out about my novelty rubbers. And let's try and get all of the attractions on the podcast. I'm very pleased you did, because it was a really great chat. So thank you.
No, thanks for having me on. It's been great. It's been really enjoyable.
Thanks for listening to Skip the Queue. If you've enjoyed this podcast, please leave us a 5-star review. It really helps others find us. And remember to follow us on Twitter for your chance to win the books that have been mentioned. Skip the Queue is brought to you by Rubber Cheese, a digital agency that builds remarkable systems and websites for attractions that helps them increase their visitor numbers. You can find show notes and transcriptions from this episode and more over on our website, rubbercheese.com/podcast.